Hi, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to everyone joining us for the plenary session 2. I want to welcome you to the CAP conference, and in this second day, my name is Lina Canas, and I am the director of the IAU Office for Astronomy Outreach, and I'm based in Tokyo, Japan, at the National Astronomical Observatory of Japan. I'm also one of the IAU CAP working group co-chairs, alongside with my colleague Ram and Oana. We hope you are enjoying and having a meaningful experience here at CAP so far, and we encourage you to stay with us for another exciting and inspiring day. For the next 2 hours, we want to welcome you to the plenary session 2. And I want to take this opportunity, before I call my colleague Ram on stage, I want to take this opportunity to express our gratitude once again to Kavli Foundation, as this conference could not be possible without their generous support and sponsorship. We want to thank our colleagues from our sister office, the IAU Office of Astronomy for Education. Also, our thanks to the National Outreach Coordinators and IAU Commission C2 members that were deeply committed to supporting the organization and also the dissemination of CAP conference. And of course, all our colleagues globally that volunteered to dedicate their time and efforts to aid in the conference, enormous logistics. We are all here today thanks to them. Now I wanted to welcome my colleague Ram to stage, and he will provide a few announcements and a welcome short note for this second day. Ram, if you'd like to join us.
Thank you, Lina. Hello everyone. Welcome to those of us who are joining us for the first time today at the CAP 2021 virtual, and welcome again for people who are joining us again today for the second day. My name is Ramasamy Venugopal. I'm one of the co-chairs of the IAU CAP working group. So this is the first virtual edition of CAP, and we are really excited to have all of you here with us. It's been a very steep learning curve for us. So please do forgive us if something doesn't work as it's supposed to, but be rest assured that our team is here to get everything fixed and to help you. So on that note, I want to thank the organizing team, the scientific organizing committee, and our amazing team of volunteers. Our team has people from all over the world, and they've been working more or less non-stop these last couple of weeks. So thank you, team. You know, many of us have been attending virtual events this past year, and I'm sure many of you have even organized virtual events. We all know what to expect in a virtual event, but each platform is slightly different. So I'm going to take you through a quick tour of this Hopin platform. We have already shared resources on our website. You might have seen there's guides that you can download, FAQs, but also short videos on how Hopin works. But since everyone is here, let me share my screen and show you a few of the things in Hopin. All right, so this is where you land when you come into Hopin. This is the home page. Every day during conference hours, here there's a what's happening now section that shows what is the live session. So you can easily go to the live session, just click there and it'll take you to the live session. We have some instructions on how to get help. As I said, we have troubleshooting guides, instructions, and videos. We also have announcements for each day. So each day we will update these announcements. For example, we have the PDF of today's program and also some instructions for speakers and participants on how to get help. The code of conduct, we have the IAU code of conduct that's also applicable to the CAP conference, and also the schedule for the day. So you can look through the schedule for the whole day, and also you can filter the schedule by type of event. All right, so plenaries is where we are now. I'm not going to click the plenary since it's going live. But if you're in the plenary, then you can go to the chat section on the right side to chat with the other participants in the plenary. If you want to post a question in the plenary though to one of the speakers, then please go to the Q&A section of the plenary. So each page, each area in Hopin has its own chat and Q&A. So the event has a chat and Q&A. Plenary similarly will have a chat and Q&A, and the parallel sessions, each of the parallel sessions have their own chat and Q&A. So once the plenaries are done, then you'll be going into networking and e-posters. So networking is a really cool feature in Hopin. The algorithm matches each participant with another random participant. So you'll have 3 minutes to make a new connection. There is a possibility of you extending the conversation by another 2 minutes. So if both people in the session agree that they want to talk for another 3 minutes, then it's possible. So this would be both video and audio. You'll be able to have a video chat with the other attendees. So for 30 minutes every day, there's the dedicated networking session, but it's also available at other times in case you need it. E-posters, so we have about 80 digital posters for CAP. They're available all the time during the conference, so they will be available until the end of CAP on Thursday. So you can go into a poster. It's either a video or it's a Google slide, so you can view the poster, and then if you want to contact the author, you can click on register interest, which will send them an email, or you can just leave them a chat message. Parallel sessions, of course, this is where we have the oral talks, the workshops, and the panel discussions happening each day. The oral talks are all pre-recorded, but we do have the speakers available to have a live Q&A after the pre-recorded talks. The workshops are only available to those participants who have been accepted to the workshops. So if you have received an email indicating that you have been accepted to the workshop, please do turn up, because otherwise the seats go vacant. So if you're a workshop participant, I will also be sending you a reminder email and message later today. For panel discussions, they are available to everyone, so you can go and view a panel discussion, but you will not be able to share your audio and video. I should note that you can only ask your questions via chat for the plenaries, but also for the oral talks and panel discussions. But if you're in a workshop, you can also turn your audio and video on so that there is more interaction. Okay, so I will stop with the Hopin tutorial here, but there's also a couple of other things that I wanted to bring to your attention. One is that we have received several requests from you yesterday that people wanted the videos of the talks available publicly. So we will be checking in with all the authors of the videos to request that they be made available publicly on the CAP YouTube channel after the conference. So once the authors confirm, then we'll be sharing those links with you. We also have a tribute to lost colleagues form that was sent by email last week. So many of us have lost friends and family during this last year during the pandemic, and there have also been losses in our community, in the CAP community. If there is anyone that you would like to pay tribute to, there is a short form where you can fill up some information, and then on the last day of CAP, we will be publishing those tributes on our website. So I want to ask if any of you have any questions about the conference, either about the Hopin platform or in general any questions about the program, then please do post them in the plenary's Q&A. For a few minutes now, we can take some of those questions. So the last point I want to mention about technical issues is that there's a technical chat support available in the Hopin platform. So on your screen, on the bottom left of the screen, there's a blue button that says chat. So click on the chat and send a message, and that will go to our technical support team who will answer your question from the back end. But do note that we have very few people managing this chat support, so they may not be able to answer very quickly. Also, I request that you first check in with the Hop-in help resources we have on the website, because many of your questions might already be answered in the help resources and the FAQ. Okay, so if there are any questions, let's take them now. Please post in the Q&A if you have any questions. If not, I will hand it back to you, Lena, in a moment. I'm just looking at the questions. All right, I don't see anything. Do you want to? Oh, okay, I see a question. Is it too late to register for workshops? Unfortunately, yes, all workshop seats have been assigned already. Okay, I will then hand it back over to you, Lena. Thanks again, everyone, and hope you have an enjoyable and productive conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ram. On this note, not quite an announcement, but relevant for today, I want to highlight again that all questions to our speakers should be posted on our Q&A section, and please also vote. Give thumbs up, and we will select the ones that are most voted to pose live to our speakers today. So don't forget, place your questions on our Q&A under plenaries, under plenary sessions Q&A. And now I want to invite to the stage our keynote speaker, Professor Ewine van Dishoeck, President of the IAU International Astronomical Union. Thank you so much, Ewine, for being here today. Ewine van Dishoeck is a professor of molecular astrophysics at Leiden University in the Netherlands. The work of her group unites the world of chemistry with that of physics and astronomy in a very innovatively way. She has been heavily involved in the planning of major new telescopes, and the excellence of her work has been recognized with various awards, including the prestigious 2018 Kavli Prize for Astrophysics, as well as membership of several academies. Since 2018, as I mentioned, Ewine serves as the president of the International Astronomical Union, IAU, in which she has been directly involved and very active with many IAU recent projects and programs, including the celebration of IAU's 100th anniversary, which Ewine will address today. Her talk will be focused on celebrating a century of progress in astronomy. Ewine, thank you so much again for joining us. The stage is yours.
Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I hope you are doing well. It is my pleasure to talk to you in the next half hour or so about this wonderful project of celebrating the 100 years of the International Astronomical Union. So let me just go ahead and share my screen. That will take a minute or so to get everything right. Okay, here we go. Here we go, here we go. That should be there. And then we get a pointer. There. Okay, here we are. So wonderful to see you all. I wish I could look you all into the eyes in life, but this is another way of reaching actually more of you. And so I'm going to talk here about the celebration of the 100 years of the International Astronomical Union, but also reflect a little bit about what actually has happened over this century, what happened in astronomy, but also what it has brought to society and how we are now actually interacting with society through the communication that is so at the heart of this particular conference. So yes, we are far away from each other, but yet we are more connected than ever. thanks to these new platforms. And I think in spite of all the hardships that we have all had over the past years, this is one of the gains that we have had, is namely that we are close together, we are connected over and across the entire world. And together we can actually look back and reflect also on our little planet Earth and appreciate also more its fragility. So one of the results, of course, of all of this is that we here now have CAP 2021, and it's a bigger event than ever. And that's kudos to the organizers for getting so many people engaged. And it's wonderful that they can all share this. And of course, especially indebted to IAU Commission C2 for the organization, and then the Kavli Foundation for actually sponsoring this very generously and entering also into a partnership with the IAU on studying how we best can interact with the public on the public engagement. And we heard a wonderful talk already about it yesterday. So thanks to all of them for making this possible, and especially to Lina, Ram, and Oana for taking the lead in all of this. Now, not all of you that are here on the line may be familiar with what the International Astronomical Union does. So let me actually say a few words about it. The IAU is the worldwide union of all professional astronomers, meaning PhD level and above. And our mission is very simple: to promote and safeguard astronomy in all its aspects, and then especially through international cooperation. Of course, we're doing this also at the national level or at the regional level, but the IAU is really the worldwide. And the developments in the IAU has been that in its first period, it has focused primarily on promoting and safeguarding research by bringing people together for conferences. But now more and more, the emphasis is also on communication, like we're having here at this meeting, on education with our new Office of Astronomy for Education and Development through the Office of Astronomy for Development. And so that is the sort of expanded purview that the IAU now has. We were founded in 1990. We have now of the order of 12,000 members, 82 member countries, and 107 different nationalities. So you see already the challenge and interesting connections that we have there. We were founded in 1919 in Brussels at the Palace of the Academies, and that's also where we celebrated our main event in 2019. If you want to read more about the IAU and what it actually does, I can highly recommend to you to go to the IAU webpage and download our strategic plan. It's a quite thick plan, but we hope that its layout is such that you can easily grasp the priorities that are there, the priorities of the IAU as a whole, but also of the different offices that we have. The Office for Young Astronomers, with the wonderful EASIA schools, the Office of Astronomy for Development, led by Kevin Govender in Cape Town, the Office of Astronomy Outreach, led by Lina in Tokyo, and now the new Office of Astronomy Education that we have in Heidelberg. And you can see the goals and the aims and the actions actually for all of them written here in this strategic plan. Now, 2019 was this wonderful opportunity to celebrate 100 years. And when you think about it, well, 100 years, what can you do? What kind of celebration can you have? And as you will see, it started off with something relatively small and modest, but it grew and grew and grew. And that is thanks to this wonderful team that we had, especially Jorge Rivero, who was our project manager, Lina, and also Bethany Downer, and their teams. There are many, many people involved. And I would also highlight Pedro Russo in Leiden, who played a major role in making all of this possible. So just to give you an idea of this timeline, actually in mid-2017, that's when as the executive committee, we started to realize that 2019 is coming close, we need to start doing something. And at that stage, we were thinking about a book, a conference. So that is what was started planning in mid-2017. But then we realized that, well, maybe we can do something a little bigger. We always realized we could never be as big as the International Year of Astronomy in 2009, which was a fantastic event worldwide. The scope of that was much larger and also had much more funding. The first thing we needed to do was basically fundraising to at least get some funding in place in order to do more than just a book and a conference. Unfortunately, we were successful in that, and I want to thank especially the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation here, and also Leiden Observatory, who contributed really very significantly and allowed us to attract a coordinator already quite early on in late 2017. That was an important first step. At that stage, we also had our first face-to-face planning workshop, where we started to hammer out sort of the program, the projects that we could do, especially the big global flagship projects and the grassroots projects. Here, drawing again on the lessons from the International Year of Astronomy. And thanks also to Lars Christensen, who was present there and guided us through many of these aspects. And then early 2018, that's when we started to plan the projects. Also the IAU exhibition design happened at that stage because we were starting early already in 2018 August, when there was the General Assembly in Vienna. And there it was sort of where IAU 100 was launched, and that's also where the symposium was on 100 Years Under One Sky. So a lot of events had to be already in place by August 2018. Well, then came 2019, and that was truly a roller coaster. I was fortunate to be observing it from close by, and it was really impressive how there was one flagship every month, and just wonderful to see. Now, yesterday we also talked a little bit about the goals, the aims of such an event. And here is some of the IAU 100 goals that we had. Experiences, that was clearly an important aspect, and especially observing experience and widespread access to astronomy knowledge. That was, again, one of those goals. But we were targeting not just the general public at large, but also especially children, education. So we wanted to support and improve the use of astronomy as a tool for education, development, and also diplomacy. Dark and quiet skies are also very much at the heart of the IAU, and that was also made one of the goals. Then the fourth bullet is also important because we were not just targeting the general public, we were also targeting policymakers, but especially our fellow IAU astronomers, because for many astronomers, even though they are an IAU member, they don't know quite well what the IAU is all about, what it stands for. They once in a while go to a symposium, maybe to a general assembly, but they don't appreciate everything else that is happening in the IAU, especially now with our offices. And so that's why we wanted to also highlight actually what the IAU is doing. And what has happened in astronomy there, and the role also that IAU has played in that to the general astronomers at large. Equity, inclusion, diversity were at the heart of all of our activities. We made sure in sort of when projects were awarded that was an integral part of all of these projects. And then, of course, we didn't want to just look backwards to 100 years, we especially wanted to look forward to the next 100 years of astronomy. So if you want to read about everything that was done, a report, I highly recommend the report that came out of the 100-year celebrations that is posted on the website, both the IAU 100 website and the IAU website. It's very nicely illustrated, and again, I can only stress for outreach and these kinds of activities the importance of having good graphics, having good photos, having good graphics, and in this case, especially thanks to Anita Markgraf-Druk, who has made wonderful illustrations. Good. Well, 2019, we were actually lucky. It was not just 100 years of the IAU. It was actually also the 100th anniversary of the 1990 solar eclipse, which proved that Einstein was right. The Eddington expedition and the other expeditions to both Principe Island and to Sobral. And moreover, it was the 50th anniversary moon landing. So both of these events were easy to identify as sort of cornerstones of our celebrations. But let's take again a step back and just allow me a few minutes of astronomy here. Because when we started to think about the content of the exhibition, we also had to think, well, what has actually happened in the last 100 years? Of course, there have been many, many highlights. We asked the divisions, IAU divisions, to come up with the highlights, and before we knew, we had 200 highlights, key papers that have, key discoveries that have happened over the last 100 years. But we needed to trim that down to just a few highlights that we could show in an exhibition and that we could tell our stories about. One of those is, of course, how our view of the universe have changed. In 1919, we knew only one galaxy, our own Milky Way. Now we know that the universe is teeming with galaxies. And we also know that what we can see with our own eyes, the atoms and molecules, is just only a few percent of the total content of the universe, the mysterious dark matter and dark energy. The 1990 solar eclipse was important to test general relativity, but we have gone beyond that. We have tested it in many more extreme environments, such as here, the black hole in the center of the Milky Way, which was awarded actually the Nobel Prize last year. And this famous image, the first image of the shadow of a supermassive black hole in 2019, again, you know, confirming and testing Einstein's predictions more than a century ago. Gravitational waves were predicted more than a century ago, but they were not found until 2015, again opening up a whole new eye on the universe, and also testing the evolution of stars, especially most massive stars, much more massive than the stars that we normally see. In 1919, we had no clue as to where the elements in our body came actually from. Now we know that they are produced by nuclear fusion in the interiors of stars and in supernova explosions. And interestingly, 2019 was also the International Year of the Periodic Table. So we partnered with them and had some joint events there that made sort of our reach go beyond astronomy into chemistry and physics. In 1919, we knew only the 8 planets in our own solar system. Now, of course, we know that on average, every star has at least 1 planet. The scientific discovery didn't come until 1995 and was awarded the Nobel Prize in 2019. But we also now know that most of these planets are actually of a type that we don't have in our own solar system. And that brings the whole question also as to how these planets are formed in these planet-forming disks that we are now imaging thanks to ALMA. Their structure, but also their content, water, where is the water? Where is the water on the planets? Can these planets be habitable? All kinds of questions that have been with us for ages, but that we now actually have the scientific tools to really investigate them. So we're up for a very exciting next few decades in order to starting address these questions. And finally, also the question as to how we were formed actually, so 4.6 billion years ago. And we're getting some very interesting new clues of that from the missions to the asteroids. Hayabusa 2 is already back on Earth with a sample. Osiris-Rex is on its way. The meteorites that fall on Earth, they are messengers from the early solar system, the inner part. And of course, the outer part is where it's cold, where you have comets, a mixture of rock and ice. And the Rosetta mission in 2014 for the first time actually landed on a comet and studied and sniffed the gases out of such a system in quite some details. So again, a lot of excitement going on also there, and that we wanted to highlight in the exhibition. Okay, good. So IAU 100 impact. Here are some of the numbers. I think this is the most important, 5,000 plus activities in more than 143 countries, 5 to 10 million direct participants. And if we estimate sort of that you then reach through Twitter and news and television, etc., you easily get to more than 100 plus million. So very impressive numbers for what started off as a relatively small project. We were really across the world, and what I like about this map is actually not so much where we were, but where we have more work to do. And you see very clearly that's here in Western, Middle Africa, where there is still the biggest gap in our coverage. And I think that should be a goal for the next decade, that we start to sort of fill in sort of these countries here that and connect them with what we are doing. And I know that a lot of work is going on that already. This is another graphic where you can see sort of both the global projects, the special projects that we had, the OED projects, how we engaged, etc. And let me now go into some of these aspects. Of course, the NOC network was incredibly important, and that's also one of the legacies of IAU 100 is both building up further the NOCs that Lina has been working on, and Tselung actually in an earlier stage, building up the NOC network, and not just building them up, but also getting them active. And these global events, like we had for IAU 100, are very good to not just establish a NOC, but also getting them very active. And so you see here the increases by typically 50 to 60% across the globe. All right, some highlights. We kicked off with the 100 hours of astronomy in January. Not the best time of year in Europe. There's very cloudy, etc. But in other parts of the world, it was gorgeous weather. 100 hours, we had more than 1,200 events, and this was really very good to get everybody engaged. Not just the general public, but also getting the amateur astronomy societies engaged, because in the end, they are also very important in interacting with the general public. And so to me, it was just amazing to see how every minute on the Twitter wall, the Instagram wall, there was basically posted pictures going from Nepal to Algeria to Dublin to Germany to USA. Every minute something different came in, and it was just one big celebration. It was very good as a kickoff to get everybody engaged. If we look at the projects that had sort of the biggest impact, and then certainly Name Exoworlds was that. That was a huge organization. It started already in the beginning of 2019 and didn't end until late 2019. We basically gave every country, whether or not they were an IAU member, we basically offered to every country once to name one star and one planet and have the entire population involved in that. And in case you are not aware of the star and planet in your country, please go here to the resources where you can find the wonderful graphics still where you can find all the details. So here you see the number of countries involved in the end, 112, on nearly 1 million people that were involved. And you see here also the distribution over the various continents. And just to give you a few highlights, here is Bolivia. So there were several themes that were actually offered to the countries that they could choose from. In this case, it was actually with rivers in the sense or paths. Here is in Bolivia, Khoi, and Ifaga, basically the road to paradise and the eternal path that the Milky Way has. The Netherlands, my own country, chose the world famous Dutch paintings, which of course are very much engaged with astronomy, the Sterrennacht and the Nachtwacht that you could see by Van Gogh and Rembrandt. China chose celestial deities from the ancient Chinese mythology. Here, the goddess of the sun and the goddess who drives the moon. Also very nice choices. In Canada, I really like this one, family members in the indigenous Cree language of Canada, the star and the exoplanet, mother and child. And so all of these stars that were chosen are such that anyone in that country could see them actually with a small telescope and point at it. The second global project that had sort of the largest reach was the moon landing. That's, of course, a topic that resonated with many people. It was also easy to organize in terms of sidewalk, street observing with small telescopes. But also, you know, lectures about what have we learned scientifically about the moon from the moon landing and from the rocks that the astronauts brought back on Earth. So lots of activities happening there that you see indicated here, and especially Bethany Downer was very much involved in organizing this one. Also, you know, this is where you get the attention of high-level people. This is, for example, an event at the Portuguese President's residency. The Above and Beyond expedition also had a large reach because it traveled through Europe, and it was also distributed widely. So we celebrated here this 100 years of astronomical research that I just discussed by decades, but also highlighted its wider technological and cultural implications. It started in Vienna, produced actually in cooperation with the Science Now studio in Poland. Very nice to work with our partners there. And early on, we also came to the understanding that this had to be produced and released on an open source basis, low-cost versions that could be available for the community everywhere. And so it traveled through Europe. Localized versions in other languages were actually in Leiden, Tokyo, Uruguay, Bulgaria, and very recently in Spain, in Galicia. Were posters distributed in 70 countries, translations in various languages, and then again, the open source materials have been used very widely. Because 2019 was the 100 years of the solar eclipse, that's of course focusing on Einstein, focusing on gravity, and therefore it was natural to start this project of Einstein schools, actually led by Steve Pompea, that basically established a worldwide network of schools that learned and communicated about gravity. And there were some 200 Einstein schools in 45 countries, and there is also a successful follow-up of this. The eclipse itself, the 100 years, was celebrated both in Sobral and in Sao Tomé and Príncipe, and especially Rosa Doran organized many events with the local population, wonderful with the school children, science drills, events here, high-level events, of course, that you see here, all the presidents, local presidents came over, but also we had a Women in Astronomy roundtable actually there in Príncipe, which was very well attended. Many of our projects actually had women and girls in astronomy as one of their central pieces, and especially around the time of the International Day or International Week of Women in Science, that's when a lot of activities were organized. And that's involved, again, several 100,000 women and girls, and especially highlighting the role models that we have, not to get these young children into astronomy, but basically to stimulate them into STEM careers. That's the most important thing. We draw them to the sciences. Here's another wonderful project in that context, the Molomlaba projects that I was fortunate also to visit myself when I was in South Africa in early 2020, and that ended up in the winner of the Women's and Girls in Astronomy events competition. So a very good initiative there in the townships in South Africa in order to bring young children in contact with science. Inspiring Stars was another of our traveling exhibitions for the visually handicapped. It started at the General Assembly, but then we had events in many countries, and we reached quite a number of people there. We also had an exhibition at the United Nations. Speaking about the United Nations, Dark Skies for All, that was planned to be one of our highlights during 2019. Due to various events and later the pandemic, it was actually postponed till 2020, but then it happened virtually and it went into a much bigger event than we could have imagined. I can urge you all to go to the IAU website and read about the Dark and Quiet Skies report that is posted there. It's very important also for the future of our field, for the future also for viewing the night sky, especially with the launch of the satellite constellations. And there's a huge amount of activities that is ongoing there, led actually by Connie Walker. And so please, that might also be a whole separate session dedicated just to the dark skies. Astronomy Day in schools, we really want to go into the schools, and that happened in November, and that's triggered by Paolo Bertrones, who you see over here, but was again very successful in reaching quite a number of students. Astronomy, open astronomy schools, training of teachers, that happened also throughout 2019, distributing also of telescopes still going on. And we ended then with the IAU 100 with the pale blue dot in February 2020, again just before the pandemic hit, in reflecting on 30 years of that famous image. And this has now grown into an OED flagship program that is led actually by the E-Road. We had actually a number of special OED projects that were sort of stepping stones towards larger flagship programs. One of them was Astronomy for Peace, another one focused on astrotourism, and the third one was actually an Astro Apps Challenge, which in the end happened just recently in Palestine, in the Gaza area that has now been so much affected in the recent weeks. But you see here that even in spite of all of these difficulties, this event happened a few months ago and was quite a number of people engaged. Our microgrants were also very successful. I think we had an oversubscription by nearly a factor of 10 when we put out the call. Here are just a few of the highlights. The light sound devices that were developed at the CFA were very successful for the eclipses that happened in Chile and Argentina, both in 2019 and 2020. So we were very happy to support that activity. The teacher training program in Palestine, the mobile planetarium in South Brazil. Here, also one of my favorites, the project activities with the refugees, actually in the Western Sahara and the Canary Islands. Those were all just examples of the micro grants that we supported of these grassroots initiatives. You will hear more about them in the next talks. We needed to reach not just the general public, we also needed the high-level politicians, our own IAU astronomers, we needed to reach them as well. And we did that through a number of high-level events. One of them was definitely the flagship event that we had in Brussels in April. And you see that here in this wonderful palace, where we had 2 days of astronomy and society, actually focusing not so much on the science, but really focusing on what astronomy has brought to society. We also added a professional amateur relations day to it on the Saturday, which was very well attended and was one of the first sort of activities worldwide to bring them together. It's an example of a high-level event that we had in Rome, where we celebrated the IAU 100. Of course, Rome being the location of the first IAU General Assembly that took place there in 1922. This is another high-level event in the Netherlands, actually, where we had an astronomy gala with some 800 people, including actually the Dutch king, Willem-Alexander, that you see here, actually working with the Inspiring Stars exhibition. The anniversary books, yes, were written, they did come out very good. The wonderful book by Johannes Andersen, David Baneke, and Klaus Madsen. I can urge everybody to read this. It's a very good account of the history of the IAU, and then the IAU Centenary Symposium, led by Chris Sterk and John Hernshaw, that was produced as well. In my last few minutes, let's say a few words about the lessons learned. It was a roller coaster year. It was overall a much bigger effort and a much bigger success than we could have dreamed of when we started this off. We thought we could do something nice, but we hadn't expected, at least certainly I hadn't expected anything of this scale. But of course, it also meant that when you do something of this scale, the 1 year of preparation that we had was really, really very tight. And also the amount of work that we gave ourselves, more or less, was still quite a lot for the human resources we had. So again, the team worked incredibly hard day and night in order to make this possible, not just the team, but the volunteers across the world. And I know we drove also the NOx to a level that was great for 1 year, but was also at a level that was difficult to sustain much longer. So that is one of the lessons learned. The other lessons learned is that fundraising for these kinds of events is not trivial. You can get a lot of support when you have sort of a label from the United Nations, like the International Year of Astronomy. But when you have just a 50 or 100-year celebrations, sponsors look at it and say, why? So you really need to come with very good arguments. And it was quite a challenge in order to get to the level of funding that we did. We were very grateful that we managed to get there, but it was still quite a challenge. Some other lessons learned, the global projects were especially appealing for the NOx, especially for the smaller countries to get engaged in this. And some of these were also worked clearly much better when they had a paid project manager. Now, it didn't need to be much, 3 months of salary for a project manager, but that was enough to sort of be this engine, this driver of that particular project. So I think that's a lesson there as well. And these event-like actions, like the 100 hours, sorry, I should say the 100 hours of astronomy, actually, again, worked quite well. Also the moon celebrations worked quite well. And then also there was actually quite a lot of grassroots actions that happened. In terms of the legacy, we talked already about the strengthening of the IAU NOC network. That was very important. Some of our global events have moved on to become regulars, actually in the context of the OAO. Dark Skies Awareness, International Day of Light, going to be very important also in the next years. Inspiring Stars events, the Astronomy Day in schools, now Meet the Astronomer basically, IAU Women and Girls in Astronomy. The telescopes, the small telescopes distributions that we had in 2019 have now actually taken off, especially in collaboration with the Star Shines for Everyone organization. And you see here some of that, some of the recent results, and another competition actually going on. So wonderful there, that project. And then I was just thinking, it would actually be nice, speaking as an astronomer, if we could have sort of one astronomy theme also each year. In 2019, it was clearly gravity, the moon, the sun. Those were themes, but maybe we could think of, other themes, one theme each year around which one could organize events. Think of comets, think of the Milky Way, something like that, something to think about for all of you. The other great legacy is the improvement relations with the amateur astronomer organizations. And a newsflash, we just established an IAU Executive Committee working group on Pro-Am relations. In fact, it's having its kickoff later this week, led by John Hernshaw, and I'm very excited about that in strengthening that relationship. So another good outcome. And finally, there's all the things, that you cannot put in numbers, but are just as important, the impact. I know people like to measure impact, but to me, there's a limit to what you can learn from these numbers. If I just see the excitement when you do one of these events, if you see the inspiration that you give to people, the perspective that you give to people, that's just, you cannot express that in numbers. And there are many examples of that during IAU 100 that happened. And so that's no surprise there also that all of this has also resulted in some awards to the IAU 100 team, like this Dutch NWO Communication Award. So again, kudos to the team. Let me end with one of these pictures and just remind us all that we are so fortunate in astronomy that we have this wonderful asset of the night sky. It's available to everyone, everywhere in the world, where we are. It stimulates fascination, it stimulates inspiration in astronomy, and it leads to these very biggest questions that humankind has. So let me end here and thank you again one more time to everybody who made this possible. With 100 years under one sky, we have reminded the people, we've inspired them, and we've reminded them that we're all world citizens under the same beautiful sky. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ewine. And thank you for this overview of the IAU 100 years anniversary, that were in reality a global celebration of astronomy achievements and discoveries over the past 100 years. Quite the impressive set of activities and the impact and hopefully a strong legacy in the years to come in our community. So we do have a few questions. I'm having some issues with I want to warn my colleagues, I have some issues with accessing some of the questions, but I have taken some notes of some of the ones that were posted recently, and one of them is done by our colleague Duruti, and he asks, could we include some activities that take into consideration astronomical heritage?
Yes, definitely. I mean, heritage is actually one of my own favorites working group. We have a working group on that. I think it's Commission C4 on astronomical heritage, and it was part actually of our IAU symposium. What was it? 369 in Argentina, which happened late 2020. And to me, fascination of going to all of these places on Earth, centuries ago, many centuries ago, where you see sort of the heritage of astronomy is very important, and we need to treasure that, and we need to protect that.
Thank you, Ewine. Another question from our colleague Mamta. What are the specific efforts being carried out by the IAU Women in Astronomy team, especially within Europe and, of course, around the world? Do you know any highlights that we can identify?
Yeah, so I think in the context of IAU 100, if I just stick to IAU 100, there were many activities actually across the world, and then there are good examples of that also on the IAU 100 website. If you go there, I mean, that was I remember in South America, Spain, in the Netherlands, we had a wonderful day, which is very good speakers, but also with good activities. So I think that was really an excellent trigger. I think with all of these things, we need to make sure that we can also maintain it. We need a new engine sort of to drive us and make sure that we do it again next year, or at least the year after, that it becomes sort of a regular particular event. And I think that is where some of the challenge is. We have a working group on women in astronomy that has actually focused in the last years mostly on a gender gap study that was done by the International Science Council, which is interesting also in itself, but is more a study rather than activities. So I think it's a good point that we may need to pick up some of those activities again.
Ewine, there is, and I want to thank my colleagues for helping me with the questions. There's some issue with the interface in my sidebar. I want to apologize for this. I can only see a limited amount of the Q&A. There's another question from Patricia Hernandez that the question from our colleague is, in the last few years, there's some confusion has grown with the public about the existence of an Astronomy International Day. Is the IAU thinking of supporting some specific dates that we can say, okay, this is the Astronomy International Day that we can officially support as International Astronomical Union?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have had much discussion about it. In fact, Lina, I would be interested in your, I would bounce this question back to you and see how you see this actually, whether this is, I mean, we of course have activities around the International Day of Light, and especially in terms of the dark and quiet skies. Again, I cannot stress enough how important that is at this particular moment in time to make everybody aware of the threats to our dark and quiet skies. That's incredibly important. But Lina, how do you feel about an astronomy day?
Well, it's something that we have periodically received these questions from our community, from our national outreach coordinators, and to reach a consensus of a particular day is quite controversial, if we can say it like this, because it will be hard to find a consensus that everyone can agree that a particular day, unless it's strongly meaningful for a vast majority. So we need to think globally and to establish or to decide that one particular day will be the International Astronomy Day. Will have to be something that we should discuss with UNESCO and establish, as you very well mentioned, similar to an International Day of Light. There are a lot of national astronomy days that different countries and different regions celebrate already. So it's from our experience, it's quite hard if it's something that will be crowdsourced.
Yeah, it doesn't, what works on one half of the sky doesn't work on the other half of the sky. So that's both in terms of viewing. So, any case, there may be more questions still.
Thank you, and I believe we are almost in our time. Again, I want to apologize for the issue with my log. Text log in Hopin. We have, my colleagues are informing me we still have 2 minutes to go. I will just try one more time if I can move my message. My apologies. There's some, my computer froze. And again, I really want to apologize for this technical error from my side. And Ewine, I want to thank you again for being with us here today. And
well, I really want to thank all of you, because I was happily watching all of you making this into a big success. IAU 100, it's basically you, and I miss you. I mean everybody here on this call that made it possible, because it was a huge effort by everyone. you.
And Ewine, I also want to take this opportunity that you have access to the chat and to the poll from the plenaries. So if you could, and if you'll stay with us a few more minutes, if you could perhaps address some of the questions or the more questions that our colleagues are posting. And again, I apologize for this glitch from my side. Thank you so much, Ewine, again, for being with us. Thank you.
Luck.
Thank you. And now I want to proceed with our next speakers, with plenary talk 6, astronomy and society, why does it matter? Communicating the societal impact of the European Southern Observatory by our colleague Anna-Lynn Wegener. And I will ask my colleagues if they can play the pre-recorded talk. After the video, we will have again a Q&A session. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Anna-Lynn Wegener. I'm the head of communications at the European Southern Observatory, ESO for short. And I'm really grateful that today I get a chance to talk to you about astronomy and society and why it matters. And I'm going to talk more specifically about communicating the societal impact of the European Southern Observatory. So let's just start in the beginning. Why is it important that we as research performing organizations or research infrastructures study societal benefits and what we contribute to society? And I think the first and foremost reason really is we have a responsibility to society. As we're funded by public money, we want to show society what we're spending it on and that it's well spent and that there's benefits coming out of it. And this in turn helps us make the general case for astronomy and for fundamental research. But it also helps us to secure support by member states, which for ESO as an intergovernmental organization is the important audience, by funders, by the public, by all sorts of different audiences, really. But also there are just some fascinating stories to be uncovered through this exercise of looking at the societal benefit of astronomy organizations or astronomy in general. And then there's also a political element to it, a little bit the fact that everybody's doing it, in particular in the research infrastructure environment, is something that political stakeholders really expect us to do and yeah, encourage us to look into. And then finally, it's actually an extremely motivating exercise because it helps people who work at these organizations to see why what they do matters and that they are contributing to a better society. So with this in mind, ESO embarked on a study in 2020 to, for the first time, systematically evaluate its benefits, the ones that it provides to society. And that study had two goals. So the first one is providing a factual and compelling narrative of ESO's societal benefits across a range of domains. And then the second goal is more in the area of communication, so raising awareness of these benefits amongst all stakeholders. And I'm going to focus on both of them today. So in terms of the study, we actually conducted two studies in parallel. One which was more general on the impacts of ESO on society, in particular maybe for the member states. And then a second one which looked specifically at Chile, our host country where our observatories are based. You can imagine that the benefits that a country with a presence or an ESO site derived from the organization are somewhat different from those benefits derived from countries that do not host any infrastructure. So we embarked on a study 3.5 to 4 months together with a consultant called the European Future Systems Innovation Center, or EFIS for short, who are really experts at looking at research infrastructures and their impact. And together we initially embarked on a documentary analysis, so really read around a lot of historical documents regarding ESO to see what the mission is and where we have documented over time how we are contributing to society. But then also we engaged in stakeholder interviews and spoke to over 50 different people from really quite different realms of society: scientists, council delegates, ESO staff, alumni, but also members of the public, teachers that have in some way or the other been impacted by ESO, and we tried to distill this out of these interviews. And then the third element was really an analysis of data that we collected internally in ESO, for example, publication data or user data and statistics. And looking at all of this together, we try to derive impact pathways. So that's a framework that EFIS developed to look at the impact of research infrastructures, where you're really first looking at the resources and the activities of an organization to see which outputs are generated, and then from the short-term and long-term outcomes derived are impacts of this output. So impacts are really a little bit abstract in the sense that it could be increased trust in science or increased scientific literacy of society, which are a lot harder to quantify and describe than outputs such as, okay, here's a scientific publication coming out, or these are our user statistics. And from that analysis, we found out that ESO's impact really clusters around 5 areas. So the first one is science and engineering, which is not a surprise for an astronomy organization that operates telescopes, but also economy and innovation. So how does what ESO does contribute to economy, and how does our innovation maybe help industry and through that way contribute to economy? The third one is talent development. How does ESO contribute to people developing skills that they need and that advances society in different ways? The fourth one, education and outreach. I don't have to explain anyone here why this is important. Then the fifth one is international collaboration and policy. Because I only have 12 minutes today, I'm going to be really fast and just look at education and outreach sort of indicatively. Can't show you much, but at least a little teaser. So here are the 9 different ways in which we found out that ESO's education and outreach efforts impact on society. Increasing scientific literacy, promoting STEM careers, increased public support to astronomy and science, contribution to diversity and social inclusion in science, contribution to arts and culture, professionalization of science communication, something that this conference also really contributes to, placing Earth in the context of the universe, so really giving people a bigger context of themselves, their planet, and maybe also the fragility of their planet in the universe. Public inspiration and fascination is something we're striving for. And then also shaping national identities as astronomy nations. And the country that really comes to mind here first is Chile, which now uses the slogan almost saying they're the capital of astronomy in the world, because this has impacted so much on their identity and how they perceive themselves. And of course, places like ESO and many other observatories have impacted in this area. So then what data came out of the study? And this is really the numerical indicators I'm looking at now. In the area of outreach and education, there are things like the number of public visitors we receive to the observatories, or the number of times that ESO is mentioned in the press, the social media followers we're reaching regularly, and then also the visitors to the ESO Supernova Planetarium and Visitor Center. But beyond that, we looked at case studies and really took a deep dive into some of the impact areas. For example, here promoting STEM careers. You can only see little of this on the slide, but what you can see is the different activities that ESO engages in to generate this impact. So organizing astrocamps for students and running workshops for teachers, producing teaching kits, engaging in events such as Girls' Day, where we're bringing girls on site to be exposed to professions that are traditionally male-dominated. And then also the contribution to science teacher journals such as Science in School and other educational platforms such as Space School. Another outcome of the study was a lot of extremely good quotes from many, many different people in many different areas that are, of course, a very nice way to tell the story about ESO's impact kind of in the voices of the people who have been impacted. So how do we put all of this together and make this into an interesting piece of communication? The actual deliverable of the study itself was a report, quite a thick, dense report, very political, that was aimed at our council, which was the primary audience, so that's all great. But we also felt that a lot of the stories in there and a lot of the material was relevant for other people, and we wanted to reach decision makers and funders with it more generally. We wanted to inform the astronomy and engineering communities about it, industry contacts, public, but also ESO staff to really show them, well, your work matters. Here, look at how. So we devised communication campaigns with the goals of allowing people to learn about the value of astronomy and basic research, promoting awareness and the appreciation even of ESO and its impact, maybe even creating a sense of pride in the organization, and certainly building support for it and the extremely large telescope as its big next project. We also were aiming for accountability in the use of public money, and we wanted ESO stakeholders such as council or our staff to be able to go out there and tell our story to all sorts of audiences that maybe we as a communications department can't reach so much. So in terms of activities, what we did first is to distill down this big, not so easily digestible report into something short and very visual, like an executive summary brochure that we produced. And from there on, we tried, well, we used all the channels we have available to get the message out there. So it starts with newsletter announcements and dedicated web pages on ESO and Society on the ESO website, social media campaigns, presentation at conferences like this one, but also developing resources, slide decks and infographics that other people at ESO or people who would like to speak on behalf of ESO can use to get the message out there. We've also organized and continue to organize events for staff virtually at the moment due to the situation where we talk about the societal impact the organization has. And there's some video material to come out soon as well. So let's take a quick look maybe at the social media campaigns too, because, well, just to illustrate a couple of examples. So we ran two campaigns, one internationally in English and one in Chile in Spanish, in which we reached internationally around 200,000 people, a little bit more, and Chile estimated around 80,000 people, with a lot of different content. So we talked about the science discoveries enabled by ESO, we shared numerical indicators in certain impact areas, infographics, but we also told the story about a lot of people that kind of passed through ESO as fellows or other staff, or that have been impacted by ESO in another way, for example, collaborators, industry contacts, and so on. And we also had an interactive element or an engagement element to this, where we asked people to share their story of how ESO impacted their lives, and got some really, really nice stories out of that. So just to wrap up, because such little time, here's some lessons learned. Definitely not enough time for the study, 3.5 to 4 months. If you want to do a deep dive, you need longer, ideally. The importance of data quality and standardization. So a lot of the data that we collected within the organization was not easy to analyze. It was just not in the shape that you could easily draw messages from it. And that's maybe something that we as an organization can work on to be better equipped for these exercises in future. Working with consultants has a huge advantage in the sense that they're experts in evaluating impact of research infrastructures, but they're not experts in the organization. So they have to spend time learning about the organization. And I think the lesson here is that if you bring in consultants, you can't expect them to come in and do the work beginning to end, but that you as people who work at these organizations have to really support them and work hand in hand with the consultants to get the good stories out, to establish the contacts and to give the context. Running two campaigns with a different audience and timing and logistics, and then as a consequence also different political messages, has its challenges, for sure. But then also there were fantastic engagement opportunities that we found in this that we maybe didn't expect that much. So we got quite a few invitations to speak at conferences, our DG, but also people from other departments, including myself, got a chance to talk about this work, which is really great. The social media engagement with staff and collaborators was really good. And then also we had things that we didn't even expect, where we got contacted by high-level decision takers and funders in some of our member states who got interested in this work and said, well, that looks really interesting. Can we talk to you about it? Or can we have a virtual visit to your observatories to learn more about the organization? So these were things that we didn't expect, but that were really great outcomes. And then for me, having started at ESO just a little over a year ago, and this being the first project that I really worked on with the entire communications department, it was a very rewarding project because everyone could contribute something, and it was a topic we were all excited about. So it was a great start in the organization, more from a personal point of view. Right, and that's where I'm going to leave you. I have a couple of resources here if you want to read up on some of the things that I've said today. But I'm also available for questions either now or later offline. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anna-Lynn. And I now would like to call you to stage and to answer a few questions from our viewers. And again, I apologize if, again, I have the glitch regarding the questions. So, from our colleague Esther, you mentioned a few types of interviewees. Can you give an estimate on how many of each of you interviewed and how many from the general public, how many teachers, etc.?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I realized that the quality of the audio was quite poor. I apologize. I didn't have that feeling when I recorded it. Yes, so we interviewed quite a few different ones. I have to admit that off the top of my head, the split, I can't really tell you. So a lot of them are on the side of kind of the political stakeholders. There were a lot of council delegates we talked to. Then there were teachers that have participated in teacher trainings, for example, organized by the Supernova. There were participants of, I don't know, astrocams, things like that, and also members of the public. We were definitely skewed towards more the political stakeholders. In order to give you the exact numbers, I would have to actually look that up, and I could post that later on if you like.
Thank you, Anna-Lynn. Yes, of course, and always our colleagues can direct message you for further information. So please feel free to use CAP and this opportunity to reach out to our presenters at any time and pose more questions. Now, from our colleague Robert, which ESO activities give best impact per invested hours or euros, and which don't give good return on investment?
Well, I have to tell you that we did not do the comparison. I think it would actually be really unfair because we're doing so much which has impact in so many different areas. So if you wanted to weigh them up, I think it would be tough. Also, depending on the audience or the kind of stakeholder, you're interested in very, very different things. And then also, interestingly, different countries, different member states and different countries around the world benefit in very different ways. So it's very, very hard to say this. And we really didn't look into it. And I think we also shouldn't, because I think it's the overall package of all the different things that actually weren't possible one without the other, right? If we weren't doing great research or wouldn't operate excellent technology, I don't think we would be good at doing the outreach either. So it's kind of really interlinked and it's hard to untangle. Plus, it's actually very, very hard to assess quantitatively. And I think I also want to emphasize this now after having seen my talk again, which is a strange experience, by the way, a couple of days later, that a lot of the work we did was more qualitative than quantitative because it's very, very hard to assess impact. Like Ewine said in a talk, right, a lot of the things you can't get numbers for, but it's qualitative. You need to listen to people to hear the impact.
Thank you, Anna-Lynn. I would just like to pose one more question because we're running out of time, and this time is from our colleague Amelia. Does ESO carry out any actions addressed to publics with special needs or to low-income social groups or underrepresented minorities?
Special needs is certainly something we're starting to look into. And then low income. So what we're doing, where we're definitely heavily investing at the moment is regional communities in Chile, around the sites of our observatories, so that we're really working more with the communities there and also looking at ways how they can benefit even more directly from ESO's presence there. And we're actually putting up a whole program in this area, and if you're interested in that, please take a look at the Spanish, well, not the Spanish, the English version, but the Chilean study that's called Astronomy and Society. I put it on the last slide, or I can share the resource again, where we're really describing in detail what we're doing in Chile with regional communities.
you so much, Anna-Lynn, once again. And I invite you to go to our Q&A. Have the time, and if you'll stay with us for a few more talks, to go through all the numerous questions that our participants are posing, and if you can, to please answer in our Q&A. Thank you so much. Thank you. And now I would call our next colleague, that Lars Lindberg Christensen, and we will talk about an unprecedented global communications campaign for the Event Horizon Telescope first black hole image. I would like to ask my colleagues if, so this is a live talk. I don't know if our colleague is present. My apologies. My apologies. I switched. Lars, if you can give your talk now.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to
switch. My apologies. Now it was my colleague Parsa addressed next, and I misread the list. But if you can address our participants now, I would appreciate. Thank you so much.
No problem. However, it's best. It's a pre-recorded talk, so the moderator has to cue it up.
Thank you.
Right.
Welcome to all of you. I am Karin from IRAM, which is an international research institute for radio astronomy, operating two of the best radio telescopes in the world, the IRAM 30-meter telescope in Spain and the Noema Observatory in France.
And I'm Lars Lindberg Christensen, formerly from ESO and now from NSF's NOAA lab, which is the new US National Center for Ground-Based Optical Astronomy, combining the Starlore Inter-American Observatory, the Community Science and Data Center, the International Gemini Observatory, the Kitt Peak National Observatory, the Verisi Rubin Observatory operations, and the US Extremely Large Telescope program.
We are here today to talk about the story behind the Event Horizon Telescope's first black hole image. First, we'd like to thank several people for contributing to the EHT campaign, a very big collaboration indeed, also in terms of communications. The unprecedented and globally coordinated campaign for the promotion and dissemination of the first black hole image obtained by the EHT collaboration was prepared in a period spanning more than 6 months prior to the publication of this result on April 10, 2019. In the following, we'd like to describe this unusual campaign and its outcomes.
EHT data were obtained by sophisticated interferometry using 8 radio telescopes. EHT is now being expanded with the U Arizona ARO 12-meter telescope at NOAA Lab's Kitt Peak National Observatory in Arizona, the IRAM Noema Observatory in France, and the Greenland telescope in, guess where? Greenland.
In October 2018, the EHT Outreach Working Group brought together for the first time communicators and outreach experts from collaborating institutions all over the world to launch this global campaign. The scale really was unprecedented. Up to 100 communicators and scientists participating simultaneously in the calls. And the stakes were enormous. This result had potential Nobel Prize written all over it.
Yeah, there was a strong sense of anxiety in the meetings and very strong involvement of the scientists whose primary focus admittedly were on data security, so containing the image and the result and positioning themselves, and secondarily on the production of content. Callum Turner from ESO wrote the core part of the press release, which I then negotiated through an extremely long but productive series of collaborative iterations and approvals by the communication team and scientists. The joint core press release was supplemented with localized content and quotes that highlighted and promoted the individual participating organizations and telescopes. Many dozens of press releases were issued.
While this approach allowed a broad range of opinions to come together, it dramatically increased the coordination workload and would have benefited from a more predefined approval structure. However, this level of coordination, including its broad and constructive collaborative approach, led to many translations, including into Hawaiian, the first such case, and a common pool of impressive visuals, including a very nice Japanese comic.
Yeah, it sounds easy, but it was not. However, after months of preparation, 6 coordinated press conferences began on April 10, 2019 at 1500 CEST.
Synchronized exactly at 13:07 UTC, the image was unveiled at all press conferences, either through a state-of-the-art Zoom video produced by ESO, or through showing the black hole image.
As you can imagine, there were regions like Asia where the timing worked out less well, as it was very late in the evening. So thanks to everyone there, especially Masaki, for being so flexible. We used a series of tools, with not surprisingly Google Docs being the lifesaver that allowed us to collaborate safely on documents using the obfuscated links feature.
Various social media channels, streaming platforms, and Reddit were employed by individuals and organizations. The result trended as #1 on Twitter globally. Another remarkable aspect of this result was the amount of memes and popular culture references that were shared on social media, demonstrating that the image not only had reached people far wider than the results before, but also that people seemed to be as excited about the results as the scientific community and engaged to co-create and share heavily on social media. This popularity was probably even enhanced by the simplicity of the image and its easy identification with the black hole, combined with the public's well-known fascination with these objects.
We measured a potential global reach on the order of billions, as much possibly as 4.5 billion using 2 independent measures. It reached the top spot on Google News, got its own Google Doodle, was the most popular story ever published for many of the scientific organizations involved so far. And there were live streams with millions of viewers and coverage on hundreds of TV channels. And also politically, science was solidly put on the agenda for a moment. For instance, in the US House of Representatives Committee on Science, Space and Technology, the European Commission in Brussels, by the Japanese Ministry of Education, Culture, Sport, Science and Technology, and the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau tweeted.
We believe that this unprecedented campaign has led to a significant boost for the EHT and its involved observatories and organizations, but also for astronomy, for science, and for international peaceful collaboration in general. Chances are that the big discoveries in the future will be made by big science infrastructures in big global collaborations, and likely increasingly in the areas of multi-wavelength, multi-messenger, and time domain astronomy. This new landscape involves certainly tremendous opportunities, but also challenges for science communicators. And at the same time, it is also clear that the communication needs of our society and its citizens have changed.
Yeah, this all requires an advanced level of protocol and professionalism. So we have a few conclusions. Ideally, the astronomy collaboration presenting the result will have a full-time communication specialist leading the effort, working with all the many other communicators from various institutions and stakeholders.
A common strategy with regard to embargo policy and how to deal with media requests must be defined and must strictly be followed by all partners.
And a press conference should have no more than 5 speakers, ideally 3 or 4, one moderator.
Media training for the press conference panelists is also necessary, and the various PIOs involved should help edit and trim the presentations.
And the goal of a press release is similar to that of a press conference, to simply and clearly explain the science results and to provide reporters with factual information they need to write their stories. It's not supposed to explain all the facts, and it's also not supposed to serve as an opportunity for team members to get visibility, at least not primarily.
All institutional social media posts should be produced in advance, if possible, translated as needed, and coordinated through a social media coordinator or a manager.
All visual material needs to be fully cleared under the most open license possible, for instance, Creative Commons attribution, and be available in high resolution, low compression, so that they can be pooled and shared amongst the partners. Another presentation will discuss this issue further, Peter Michaud's talk in session 37.5 on day 4. We'll leave you with a quote from astrophysicist and author Ethan Siegel from Forbes, who elegantly sums up the science result itself.
Thank you very much for your attention. We hope to see you all soon in person. Keep safe and continue observing.
Thank you so much, Lars. I'm not sure if you can hear me. I don't think my camera is now working. I apologize again.
We hear you.
Today is not a good tech day from my side. I apologize to everyone. And thank you so much for being here today. And of course, thank you and to Karin for the wonderful presentation. We are a bit short on time, but I really wanted to ask you, well, in coordinating such a large, diverse teams and with so many different backgrounds and different ways of communicating. You mentioned protocols, collaborative structure, very well defined. I wanted to ask specifically regarding human interaction, if there are any particular highlights or even pointers for some of our participants that have to coordinate such diverse teams. If you can go a bit more into that human aspect of the interactions.
Thank you, Lena. I think this is a very pertinent question. So, in fact, some of the questions in the Q&A also deal with this. What we saw was a very interesting dynamic with the scientists. So you had this sort of a group of communicators and a group of scientists. And of course, you want to work together, but also you want to make sure you respect each other's area of expertise. We wouldn't tell the scientists how to reduce their images or data and come up with the conclusions in the papers. But on the other hand, the scientists are very easily maybe walking into the communication territory, if you will, in a well-meant way. I'm not saying that, but it's sometimes difficult in that process when the stakes are so high and people literally have Nobel Prize winning science to balance these things out and make sure that you can do and get room to do your best efforts in the communication area. So someone asked in the Q&A about media training. And that's a very good case in point, right? So you sit with very good slides from the scientists, but you also have to make sure the communicators can really then lead the actual press conference by giving the scientists media training, by taking their input slides and then transforming them to something which is legible and appealing and easy to understand. And that process and that dynamic is a very tricky one. So my main message, I think, there is make sure you position yourself as professionals in your area and get the necessary space to really run the show and sort of take over control of the communication part and the press release part. Luckily, there weren't any leaks because we worked very hard with the scientists to contain that part of the story. And if there were leaks, it was more for other reasons.
Thank you so much, Lars, and of course to your colleague Karin for being here with us today. And we will move on to the next plenary talk from our colleague Parsa, and who will address the impacts of content strategy on pseudoscience, elimination, and prevention in social media. This will be a live talk. Hello, Saeed.
Hello, Lina. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Now I'm going to share these slides.
Hello,
welcome, Parsa. Hello. Yes, we can see you and we can hear you. Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
Very well. Very well. Thank you, Lena. Hello, everyone. I'm Parsa Bigdeli, science journalist and content developer, and I'm really happy to be here talking about the impact on pseudoscience elimination and prevention in social media on behalf of my colleagues Saeed Jafari, who is also here, and Ziba Ahmedi. First of all, let's take a look at science and pseudoscience. Science is the pursuit and application of knowledge and understanding of the natural world, following systematic methodology based on evidence. While pseudoscience consists of statements, beliefs, practices that claim to be both scientific and factual, but are incompatible with the scientific method, like the insistent belief in aliens. So to be more accurate, what's the difference between science and pseudoscience? The acid test of a scientific claim is reproducibility, which gives us the power of prediction, practical, and falsification, which scientific claim the right to be uncertain. Therefore, there is no bias in science. But unlike science, we have our own particular biases. When we are involved with the news, our mind is using a certain algorithm to accurately perceive, process, or remember this information as rational as possible. But there are some glitches known as cognitive biases, which may have a considerably negative impact on this process. There are a large number of cognitive biases, but the following are especially relevant when it comes to news consumption. Is the tendency to seek out and value information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs while discarding information that proves our ideas wrong. In media particularly, this bias can cause to echo chamber effect. Echo chamber is an environment where a person only encounters information or options that reflect and reinforce their own. In discussions of news media, an echo chamber to situations in which beliefs are amplified or reinforced by communication and repetition inside the closed system and insulated from rebuttal. In summary, we may be trapped in a virtual acoustic room, which makes us hear only some particular claims and filter the rejections. Last September, announced that they found phosphine on Venus, which is a potential marker of life. But what we in so many so-called science fact pages, mostly in Persian, they had claimed that aliens were discovered on our neighbor planet. They only saw what they wanted to see. This is confirmation bias. When connected to the notion that most social media users operate in an echo chamber, you can see how people who rely on their social media networks for news are more likely to see their views about a specific issue reinforced challenge. Anchoring bias refers to people's tendency to consider the first piece of information about a topic as the most reliable. This is what actually tricks us in off-price shops on the price labels. Let me explain more using some mathematics. If we consider two groups A and B, and if we ask group A to solve the first problem, which is a small number, 1 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 3, etc., they may answer something about 512. Now, if to solve the second problem, which starts with 8, a bigger number, 8 multiplied by 7 multiplied by 6, etc., their average might be about 2,250. Although the correct answer is 40,320. So what just happened? This is where we talk about anchoring. Each group's calculation on the first few numbers affects on their final answer. Framing is what happens when we make decisions based on how information is presented or discussed rather than its actual substance. This can lead to decision making based on perceptions rather than content-based arguments, even if the information shared in each approach is the same. For a better understanding, let's play COVID. Suppose that you were told that 600 people were at risk of dying of COVID-19. Vaccine could save the lives of 200 of the people at risk. With vaccine B, there's a 33% likelihood that all 600 people would be saved. But there's also a 66% likelihood that all 600 people. Which option would you choose? I will answer all the questions at the end of the session. You can submit your answers in the poll section, so please go and submit them now, and let's go to the next question. Now suppose that for the 600 people at risk of dying of COVID-19, if vaccine C is used, 400 people will die. However, if vaccine D is used, there's a 33% likelihood that no one will die, and a 66% likelihood that all 600 people will die. Which option would you choose? Please submit your answers. Fluency heuristic occurs when a piece of information seems more valuable because it's easier to process. When an influencer uses a soundbite to convey an idea as opposed to a lengthy speech, this particular cognitive bias holds that that soundbite is more worthwhile than the speech because it's more accessible. So there's a narration disaster. But sometimes I find it easier to accept a claim because of the narrator's position or authority. For example, if you're a member of an Iranian family, you should accept what your great uncle or grandfather says, since politeness is very important. It is so important that it makes some grandpas feel like they're Tommy Shelby in Peaky Blinders. Before I go to the final section, I'd like to share some supplemental tips with you. False news travels 6 times faster than true stories. So for reducing pseudoscience, we should inform others about the cognitive biases and linguistic tricks. Clickbait is the content that is specially designed to draw you in. The whole purpose is to get you to visit the site it is promoting. Many science fact pages provide controversial pseudoscientific topics to bring the audience together through misconceptions to get more followers or engagements. Now there are people who invent words that have no scientific definition, like positive energy or negative energy, etc., are just made to empty your pockets. Synchronicity, the use of the concept in arguing for the existence of paranormal phenomena, has been widely considered pseudoscientific by modern scientific skepticism, like the black cat case. I'm almost sure that white cats made it up, or maybe some dogs, I don't know. As we've reached the final section of this talk, I'd like to draw your attention to these three principles which can help us improve communicating science, pseudoscience. The first is usability. The question we need to ask ourselves is whether our SciComm methods are working or not. There's a social error which makes us have bias when answering this question. We believe that these are working properly. Let's take a look at a few examples. There are some things that even more people believe, such as that we have some knowledge of how to educate. There are big schools of methods and mathematics methods, even some methods that prepare students for colleges or universities entrance exams, and so forth. But if you notice, you keep going down or hardly going up, in spite of the fact that we continually use the same people to improve the methods. This could be obvious in the generation of students who have been educated during the COVID era. As the tools upgraded, the methods have not. Another example is how to treat criminals. We obviously have made no progress, lots of theory, but no progress in decreasing the amount of crime by the method that we use to handle criminals. The type of question we asked before is actually also a way to distinguish pseudoscience. Is this working? For example, we have so many odd methods in Iranian traditional medicine, like using bee stings, which claim to cure COVID-19. Unfortunately, using the usability principle, it's shown that they're nothing more than delusions. This principle is quite simple. What you call science must work. So one of the things that improves a science promoter's strategy for showing that pseudoscience is not is explaining clearly where science works. And maybe even more important, where it doesn't, which leads us to the second principle. Scientific integrity. As Richard scientific integrity in his lecture, Cargo Called Science, a principle of scientific thought that corresponds to a kind of utter honesty, a kind of linear. The idea is to try to give information to help others to judge the value of a contribution, not just the information that leads to judgment in one particular direction or another. Preventing the conflict, you must give all the details that could throw doubt on your interpretation if you know them. If you explain a theory, for example, and advertise it, then you must also put down all the facts that disagree with it, as well as those that agree with it. The third is narration. One of the main problems that inhibit our success as science promoters is the low quality of our narration skills. We can't succeed in what we believe is science promotion if we don't know a usable method to inject our idea into our target society's texture. In my country, there's almost no science writer, not even a single water level. Most of the pop science books or other shapes of scientific contents are translated rather than produced by native experts. It's not like we're not able to explain science to our grandmother, as Einstein says, but we really can't explain science to our grandma since the lack of narration skills. Of course, we need to use such as videocasts and podcasts, which are the most popular shape of content among our audience, educational portals, and even scientific verification tools. Surely a lot of science books, but none of these would eventually work if we don't correct and improve our narration skills. So let's get back to our questions. In the first question, most people will choose vaccine A. We tend to choose demonstrate risk-seeking when we are faced with options involving potential losses. That is, we tend to choose options offering a large but uncertain loss, rather than a smaller but certain loss, as it is the case for vaccine B. Unless the uncertain loss is either tremendously greater or only modestly less. Now, if we change the sentences to a negative, like the second question, it changes how people choose. Most people will choose vaccine. Now, if you compare the numbers, the expected value is identical for vaccines A and C. It's also identical for vaccines B and D. Our predilection for risk aversion versus risks leads us to quite different choices based on the way in which a decision is framed, even when the actual outcomes are the same. And for the finale, if you'd like to talk more about cognitive science and linguistics, please feel free to get in touch with us. Thank you so much and have a nice day.
Thank you so much, Parsa, and thank you so much, Said, for joining us today and for your wonderful talk. Unfortunately, we only have time for one question, and I wanted to highlight our question from our colleague Matthias. And he asks, can or should we use the method of clickbait pages in science communication?
Your pardon, could you please repeat the question?
Of course, of course. Can you hear me correctly? Because my
Yes,
son can also.
Yeah.
Can or should we use the method of clickbait pages in science communication?
Well, it depends on your strategies. Sometimes this, these are actually tools, not methods. It depends on your method, what you want to do with your society. Yes, you can also use clickbaits, but the main problem is that so many people using the clickbaits are just using it for empty your pockets or draw your attention to non-scientific stuff. So if you want to use it for science promotion, communication, feel free, but it really depends on how your method is. The method is so important that most of our science communicators in the country, many of my friends overseas are doing it not quite right.
Thank you so much, Parsa. And I also want you to check some of our chat and also our Q&A, where some questions from our participants have also added there beyond this one. So if you'll stay with us a few more minutes, please go to the Q&A section and answer them there. Thank you so much again, and thank you, Said,
thank you very much.
for joining. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Thank you, you too. We now move to the plenary talk, the next plenary talk by our colleague Daniel. Inspiration and engagement with astronomy through Khoi and Starlore. Welcome, Daniel.
Hello, good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Firstly, I'd just like to thank the organizers, CAP, for this opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Daniel Cunnama, and I am the Science Engagement Astronomer at the South African Astronomical Observatory. We're based in Cape Town with our observing telescopes in the Northern Cape in South Africa. In my role, I'm tasked with the promotion and popularization of astronomy. Today, I'd like to talk to you about something which has become very close to my heart in the last few years, something I feel very passionately about. And something that I've been working on with primarily Kerry Jones, who has a company, African Tongue, which is an NGO, and she also is affiliated with the Rhodes University and Stellenbosch universities in South Africa. And her work is in primarily linguistics, and she has been working with the Khoi and San for over 10 years. I've been very fortunate in the last year or two to have been included in her work and welcomed into the community, which has been a very, very special experience. And some aspects of that I'd like to share with you today. So in South Africa, we have a very diverse and rich population. We have a multilingual and multicultural society. We have 11 official languages, as well as over 25 other languages which are considered significant. We also have challenges which are low literacy. A lot of our teaching will take place in individuals' second or even third languages, and is primarily from a Western basis or perspective. What this means, though, is this diversity is that we do have incredible opportunities to engage people in a diverse and varied way, incorporating these other languages and cultures, and trying to reach people through outcomes which are familiar to them. So a lot of the work which I'm going to talk about today is from that basis. We are trying our hardest to recapture, rediscover the relationship of this with the stars of these people, these indigenous people who once had a incredibly close relationship with the stars. There was an intimate relationship with the stars, something which these days, and actually through a lot of the science we do as astronomers, we've become disconnected from, because of the understanding that the stars are so far away and don't influence our day-to-day lives. But in that, in losing that, we've lost a lot of this inspiration and connection with the stars, which is very, very important, and important to get people interested in astronomy. I think that people's stories of the sky and of the stars are an excellent way to get people engaged at the first point in astronomy. For much of us, particularly those in Western cultures, we would have been introduced to astronomy either at a young age from school, but potentially through popular culture, things like Star Wars. And, like a lot of people have their interest in space and stars through the stories that we tell. And those stories are not the same stories that other cultures have. So capturing these stories and sharing these stories and trying to engage people with stories that are familiar to them, or feel close to their heart, is a very powerful way to engage and to inspire people into an interest in astronomy. So that's something which we are trying to do in these projects. From a geopolitical perspective, this is also very close to the South African Astronomical Observatory's heart. The observatory in Cape Town celebrated 200 years last year, and it resides on land which was historically occupied by indigenous Khoi people. Our observatory up in Sutherland, which is 4 hours north, is situated in the Northern Cape, in the Karoo, and it also resides on land which was previously occupied by the San. So this is something which we have an intimate relationship with already, and something that has not necessarily been explored in a huge amount of detail, and something which we hope to grow, and something which we feel very close to. So I just want to talk about 3 current projects which are underway. Some Starlore animations which we have completed, and I'll be able to share with you. Some art installations which we will be installing in the new visitor center, due for completion later this year, and a planetarium film which we've just recently finished shooting and are currently editing. The animations were based on Khoi and Stan's Starlore. We've put together a set of 3 animations, and with a combination of astronomy and art and Starlore from stories collected from indigenous peoples, we've combined these sort of storytelling techniques in the stories with some animations, with the artwork inspired and utilizing members of the community and their inspiration and their art. We've animated these, and then we've translated them into multiple languages. Khoi, which is not an official language in South Africa, but it's actually spoken by almost 200,000 people still. So it's one of the few cases where we actually have, content in this language, and then also in the 3 sort of more popular languages in South Africa, Xhosa, English, and Afrikaans. So all 3 of these animations are available in all 4 languages, and you can see just an example there of one of them, the story of Dancer. So the links here are to the Moon's Message story, which was the first one we released. If you can't access it through these slides, I'll also post it on my social media in the coming days, and you can link through from there. More importantly, once we've got these stories, we want to engage the community with them. So these stories will be displayed in our visitor center, both in Cape Town and Sutherland, for individuals who are passing through. But we also want to take the stories back to the people from whom the stories came and show them these animations. This is something we've done recently. We were up in the Kalahari just a couple of weeks ago for a project which I'll talk about later, and we took the opportunity to set up an outdoor screen and show some of these animations and bring these stories which the children know to life. It was a very, very special experience, and at the end of the film, the song we had, the children recognized and sort of sang along through the credits. Very, very special, and great to sort of see the recognition of and ownership of these stories, and definitely very, very rewarding from that perspective. You can see one of the characters below there also, Gugesi, who is a shooting star who takes the form of a hedgehog, who also features in one of our animations. We're also working on another project, which is some art installations. As I mentioned, we have a new visitor center in Cape Town, which is currently under construction and will be completed later this year. And in addition to the exhibits showcasing science and technology of the SAO, we will have artworks and informative exhibitions, as well as the animations on show based on traditional Khoi and San Starlore. And once again, these will be offered in a multilingual approach. We will feature the same 4 languages in all the write-ups in the visitor center, and try and expand these offerings even beyond that in the future. We'll have a couple of different installations. We have the ceiling, which you can see over here, which is going to be the actual night sky, but instead of Western constellations on it, we will be having Khoi constellations. And we'll also be having this Karin, the trickster or the creator, according to the myth, and he is holding 3 tortoises, which are what we know as Orion's belt. How we're doing these Quora constellations is very, very cool too. We are using the Bleak and Lloyd collection, which is a collection of notes, tens of thousands of pages of notes from the 1870s from William Bleak and Dorothea Lloyd, who were based in Cape Town, and were working with the indigenous communities here. And one of the things they did was spend a couple of nights looking up at the stars from Cape Town and identifying them, which was then recorded. What we've now done is gone back in time with Stellarium to those dates, January 1874, and you can see there the note. Maybe you can't see it in detail, but to the northwest at about 8 p.m. in January 74. So back in Stellarium, we've gone back in time and had a look and identified the Dussie star. Dussie is a rock hyrax, which is endemic in Cape Town. And then we've taken inspiration from the original Kalahari artwork, which is burned onto a bone rather than rock paintings. And we've then put that constellation up in the night sky, which will be reflected in our visitor center. Another one, which is a very nice example, is the Eland, which is Taurus as we would know it, which when you think about it is quite obvious. The Eland is a very large feature in Khoi and San culture, and something which is reflected in the sky. Finally, and just to wrap up, we are producing a new planetarium film. We've previously produced a film, Rising Star, which if you want to hear more about, you can see Sally McFarlane's talk, where she talks in some detail about that film. That was based mostly on South African astronomy. But we're now, and we've just finished shooting a new film where we've collected original SAN Starlore, and now we've done a sort of an animation live action mix, which we are putting together. You can see it's a story of the jackal and how he got his black back, and you can see there's the animated jackal, and he is coming alive from the bone, which has been burned with this nighttime story there. So we're very, very excited about that, and we're hoping that will be released within the next couple of months. And we will also be making a 2D version so that it can be shared a little bit more widely. In future, we obviously want to expand on these. Collecting and sharing these rare resources is very, very important to the field and supporting cultural heritage. But there's a lot of cultural heritage in South Africa, as I mentioned at the beginning, and we want to expand it from Khoi and San and incorporate all of the other cultures and collect these stories and share them in various ways. So there's a huge amount of potential here to expand, and that's something which we do aim to do. And yeah, I think that it's very, very important and very, very exciting. And I realize that I've run slightly over time, so I apologize. And thank you once again for listening, and I will take any questions.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And I invite our colleague to join us. Hello, Daniel. Thank you so much for being here with us today and for your wonderful talk. We have one question from our participants. On what basis do you inspire people who have always had a relationship with stars? Doesn't that assume that cultural knowledge is less than, which is a central assumption made by colonial history?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very important question and something that we've explored and thought about quite a bit. You know, what right do I have to be exploring this sort of cultural knowledge? And I think that the answer is that for a lot of this cultural knowledge, it is either already lost or is being lost at a very, very rapid rate. So There are a few people remaining in these communities, generally the elders, and that's who we've been working with mostly, who do recall some of these stories. And those are the people we are working with to try and record them. You know, we're trying to promote them with our animations and our videos, but primarily we just want to record them just so that they are there, and then we can use them. And then from that, we don't want to impose this knowledge or understanding on anybody. It's just a matter of sharing it and allowing people for whom this culture is significant and is part of their culture, their history, which they may no longer be very in touch with, and just allowing them to re-access that. And I think that that's something, you know, which is very, very helpful and useful. And, you know, it's up to the community as to how much they engage with these stories.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And unfortunately, run out of time. And I want to thank you again, and thanks to all our speakers, and encourage you to check our Q&A and also our chat, where our viewers post some other or more questions than the ones we managed to address here. And if you could stay with us for a little while longer to address those questions there. Thank you so much. And I also, before we go, I also want to invite you to go to our networking area and to our e-poster area for the next half an hour, and join us for these sessions. And of course, after that, we will have again, similar to yesterday, our parallel sessions. Thank you all again. Thank you to my colleagues on the back stage and for their support. Thank you so much.